What I'm going to be talking today isn't specifically about data centers, and it isn't specifically about cloud. What I'm really looking at is, what does cloud make us at NTT think about when we're thinking about the data centers? What impact does cloud have on data centers? Whether that's where we put it, or how we run it, or what the data center is a part of. But I'll get to that more a little bit later. Like she said, my name's Len Padilla. I'm the Director of Technology here. Been here for about 10 years. My accent gives me away. I'm not European natively, but I've been here for quite a long time with the company. So before I talk about what we think of cloud and what cloud impacts on our data center designs, I should tell you a little bit about NTT, because I realize it's not a household name everywhere in Europe. So NTT at its core is the telecommunications operator in Japan. So we are the BT or the France Telecom or the Deutsche Telekom of Japan. But that's really only the core. Outside of Japan, we are many more things than that. We're a global IP network operator. We run data centers in many different countries. And more different kinds of companies, whether they are consulting companies, application management companies, or different kinds of hosting and security companies. The timeline here, I think, gives you a pretty good idea of where we've come from. So the telegraph, obviously, it's in our name, and where we're headed to in terms of the different kinds of companies that we've been acquiring. The real change in NTT happened here in about 1999, and that's when NTT decided really to go international with the formation of NTT Communications. From that point, there's been a lot of acquisition activity. I was acquired in about 2000, but I didn't make the slide. But I came with the Vario acquisition, and then from then, there have been quite a number of companies added on. So, as the dominant telco in Japan and in the Southeast Asian region, you can see that our position is very strong there, but it's becoming very strong elsewhere as well. We're very strong in Europe and in North America, and spreading into Africa and South America as well. But instead of talking so much about we are, what we think, where we are, I think it's more important to step back a little bit and think about what's important to CIOs, like the people in this room. I think when CIOs think these days about data center and cloud aren't really the first things that they're thinking of. They're means to an end. The end that they're thinking about are the applications that they're running, the business expansion that they might need to take place to keep the business running, growth, expansion into different regions, etc. So not specifically thinking about data centers and clouds, rather using them as a means to an end. So what really is cloud? We get a lot of people asking us, is cloud just virtualization? Is cloud industrialized hosting? Cloud is really a combination of a lot of different things, and I'm probably preaching to the choir here. A lot of people here probably already know this. But some of the more mundane and physical parts of cloud are things that we don't think of very often. So undersea cables, for example. Undersea cables are super important when it comes to cloud, because often they're the shortest path between two areas, two disparate regions that we need to connect, and they'll provide the least latency. Least latency is really important when you start running applications in a couple of data centers, using the data centers more as a cluster than as a single location. We heard earlier somebody talking about the way that the building is changing, the facility. And these days, the cloud is putting density into the data center that we've never seen before. The impact that that's having is data centers look a lot more like machines than buildings these days. If you look at a data center 10 years ago, it really wasn't a lot more sophisticated than a barn with a bunch of racks in it. We took a building, we put some floor in there, we put some racks, servers, power, etc. And power density, cooling, how we move the air in and out, how we move the cooled water in and out, were a bit of an afterthought. And I think the density that we're able to put into a lot of facilities is a result of that. I liken this to the difference between, say, an old beige box PC 15 years ago and a very high-end machine, maybe something like a Mac Pro these days. If you look inside of them, they look very, very different. The space is laid out in a way that gets the air in, gets the air out in a very efficient way. And this is really analogous to the way that data centers are changing. Like I said, the data center these days isn't so much a building as it is a machine, and it's a machine that's part of a bigger machine that we call cloud. Now, more importantly, I think cloud is a business model. On top of all the technology and beside all of the physical implications, the business model, being able to use what you need when you need it and focus your efforts, focus your resources on your business is the most important aspect of cloud. So has cloud really changed anything? Have things significantly changed since we started thinking and talking about cloud? I was thinking about this the other day, and I thought, on a given day, how many people do I interact with in different countries, and has that changed significantly? So on the day that I was doing this, I wrote it down, and it was 9 people, or 9 different countries, people from 9 countries that I had interacted with on that day. Now I know for many of you it's going to be a lot more than that, but what this said to me is that cloud, in the way that it's spread our interaction, in the way that it's spread our organizations, spread our areas of business, has really changed the way we work. 20 people, 2 years, $1 billion US. Does anyone know who I'm talking about here? Instagram, this company that sold to Facebook recently. Could this have happened without cloud? Could this company have grown so quickly with so few people if they hadn't taken advantage of cloud infrastructures, if they didn't have somebody else worrying about the data center, somebody else worrying about the storage, somebody else taking care of compute and network? That would have been impossible, probably even up to 5 years ago. And expansion in the 21st century, the way that we expand our businesses these days, isn't so much organic growth, feet on the street, people out opening new territories within the country. It's contracting services, spreading the network, and moving into data centers that are closer to the markets we want to move to. This is the new way of expansion. This is expansion, business expansion, in the 21st century. So the important thing is that the data center really is no longer an island. In the past, we thought about the data center and what we needed within it, the infrastructure that was required to run our business. But what we're seeing today is that the data center is really part of a bigger picture, part of a bigger machine, if you will. When we talk to many of our customers today about how to build their infrastructures, we think of the data center almost like a disk in a RAID group. You could almost think of it as RAID C, so redundant array of independent or inexpensive data centers. So you need to construct things in a way where the data center is something that the data center itself can fail or can drop out of availability, but the cloud continues to be available. And geography matters. What I mean here is, for example, when Salesforce.com, who have always been one of the poster children of cloud computing or of software as a service, when they decided they wanted to reach new markets, they realized that hosting everything centrally wasn't necessarily an option. That's why we made a partnership with them to host many of their systems in Japan so that they could open Salesforce Japan. So the data center for the future, what it really is an economy engine. I think of the data center as the cotton gin of the Industrial Revolution 2.0. It really is that machine that we're using to move things forward. There will be a lot of centralization. We will move a lot of our applications into data centers, into the cloud, but it isn't one size fits all. It doesn't mean that we'll reach hyper-centralization like in the electricity industry, but there is still a place for private data centers and for regional data centers. And finally, cloud isn't only that data center far away that you contract services in. In a really robust cloud strategy, cloud is your own private data center, maybe some rented co-location space, managed hosting, and cloud services in the cloud. Putting these together into an overall architecture, letting the best pieces do the appropriate job, depending on your applications. So the things that I want to focus on today are the 3 criteria, the 3 things that we've had to change the way we think about data centers when it comes to cloud. So where is it? Physically, where do we locate that data center? What is it made of? This is something I'm going to spend a little less time talking on because I think more people later on will cover this more in detail. And what is it part of? Namely the cloud. So where is it? The things that we need to consider when we're deciding where to put a data center these days. When we opened a data center in Hong Kong, for example, we have a few data centers there, and we're getting ready to open a new one in 2013. The primary idea that we follow on why to put a data center there are the financial markets and the consumer markets in that area. So more and more these days, again, if we think of data centers as the machines of a new economy, they need to be where that economy is and where that economy is moving, where that finance is being generated. That's why having data centers in an array, again, I mentioned data center clusters, the cloud, connected with undersea cables that are the least latent connection between these facilities, are exactly what the financial markets in Hong Kong, in Singapore, and in Tokyo need. So that was a key driver in deciding where we located these new data centers. And again, business expansion areas. Everybody knows that the economies that are growing the fastest these days are some of the Asian economies, whether that's on the financial market side or on the consumer side. It's the place that many companies, many European companies, many American companies want to be present in order to grow their business. So what this means is that we need to have facilities there because some of the services that they're offering won't withstand the latency that would be enforced if they had everything hosted centrally, either in Europe or in Asia. So even though we're talking about the cloud, the physical world still matters. The speed of light is still what it is. Being close to the customers really does help, especially depending on the application. And the third is risk. Now, risk isn't a simple thing, because if risk were only the percentage of natural disasters, for example, a lot of these places would be colored a lot more red than they are. Risk is a combination of the probability of those things occurring and the readiness of being able to deal with them. So this is also something that we look at quite a bit. If you look in the Far Eastern region, what we see is that Japan obviously has a significant risk of earthquakes, but also a very high readiness. So it's a relatively safe place to locate data centers. But they still need a lot of managed services on top of that. They're still going to need some storage and some backup and some security services. So the services that we can wrap around that and outside of that, the low latency connections between data centers are critical. But I think most important is what is the data center a part of? Obviously the data center needs to be part of a bigger machine, that machine that we call cloud. So I'm going to finish by going through our global cloud vision, and you'll be able to see how that's shaped our decisions when it comes to building new data centers. Obviously, if you're building a cloud, the global network is important. So this is a sort of a stylized version of some of the networks that we've got in place and the bandwidth that we've got available between different regions. But one very important thing are these red lines. Again, they show the cables that NTT own and operate, the submarine cables that are very, very critical to having those low latency connections and that controlled data path across oceans. So again, it's not just, cloud isn't just virtualization. Cloud is some very important but somewhat mundane things like cables under the ocean. And it brings us to the global cloud vision. Our end vision of this, our end goal, is that the entire architecture that you use to run your application on top of is something that is much simpler to run than it has been in the past. Our goal really is to turn very complex IT operations, things that you used to have to send people running down to the data center, or even in the cloud world, things that used to have some very advanced Unix and VMware technicians taking care of these things. We want to take all of these very complex tasks and turn them into administrative duties through a portal. Some things will be possible very soon, some things will take a while, but this is our end goal. Now the benefits that come from this obviously are the things that we've talked about. So scalability, disaster recovery, elasticity, the ability to grow up and grow down on demand as we need. And then finally, that unified control pane. Being able, from a single pane of glass, if you will, whether it's for our technical operators inside the company or our customers operators to administer their systems through a simpler port, simpler than the way we've been doing it up to now. And there are a few pieces that go into this. I'll try to go over these briefly. First is the seamless network or the virtualized network. What we mean here is we within the part of the company I'm in, within Entity Communications, we've got a long history in what I'd call automated hosting. And that's grown into virtualization and that's grown into cloud. We recognized early on that we need to give our customers the tools to do as much as they can themselves in a very simple way. But networks have really lagged behind on this. When you go to procure networks, whether that's private or public networks, you quickly get bogged down in a lot of technology and a lot of protocols. We try to abstract that away from our customers and let them focus on what they need from the network and not a bunch of technology that they shouldn't need to worry about. Multi-X refers to multi-vendors and multi-protocols. The previous speaker mentioned that sometimes the decisions that you make might lock you into a specific vendor. That's something that we've recognized, that's something that we've been, I don't want to say a victim of, but something that's happened to us in the past, and that's something that we don't want to inflict on our customers. They need a much more robust technological toolbox to work with. So one of the things that we spend a lot of time on is making sure that the systems that we build don't ever lock us into one technology or another. The hybrid cloud, like I mentioned earlier, the cloud isn't just automated virtualization that's in a data center far away. A really robust cloud strategy includes your own corporate data center. It includes the networks that it might take to burst those applications into a provider data center. And of course, the networks and the services that it takes to wrap that up, whether that's managed security services or application services, which is where partnership comes in. We spend a lot of time working with partners, getting them to bring their applications into our cloud to make a much more compelling offering for our customer. So the end result is this diagram that we've all seen sort of a million times, the stacks within our applications. But the end goal here is a little different. So the end goal is to go all the way from network, all the way up through data center, all the way up through application, through cloud, through outsourcing and project management, and represent all of this, like I mentioned earlier, through a single control plane. Make it a lot simpler for people to take advantage of all of these services. So I'll run quickly through the benefits that we see here. Obviously, the benefit of the virtualized network is that a non-technical customer of ours can still get the benefits of what we will put in place with virtualized networks, so connecting different data centers together, connecting different solutions together, but they don't need to be experts to do it. They can do it through a simplified interface. Being able to move data from one location to the other, it might be simply for backup, or it might be as part of a multi-data center architecture. Again, I mentioned using the data center as part of a cloud cluster, building your application in a way that one data center or one provider can fail you, but you stay in business. You keep offering the service that you're offering. That's critical. And where that brings us is the end of our global cloud vision. What we see is, if we think outside the data center now for a bit, the data center becomes this virtualized data center. So one single control plane, allowing us to control the networks between the data centers and the different services in multiple data centers as if they were a single data center. It offers our customers a lot more resilience, a lot more scale, a lot more geographic distribution. They can reach new markets. So coming back to the summary earlier, the three things that we really think about, the three things that cloud has made us think about when it comes to data center design. Obviously the location, having everything centralized in one place isn't necessarily appropriate when you're trying to realize that expansion of the 21st century, when you're trying to reach new markets that might be far from home. What's the data center made of? Inside that building looks a lot different than it did 20 years ago. It's no longer enough to just take this big barn and throw a bunch of racks and power and servers into there. The way that we move air and data around inside that building has changed. And the last part, what is the data center part of? If you build a data center as a single standalone unit, I think that you're really missing a trick. The data center needs to be part of an overall cloud solution, of an overall application strategy.